Chad Pitts, the Executive Director of the Iowa Golf Association, to introduce Mr. Rick Brown.
It's truly a pleasure to introduce our next Hall of Fame inductee, Rick Brown. I can remember the first time I met Rick, which was at the Iowa Masters when I was still in college. Binker Memorial Golf Course, John Newton, who's here tonight, runs the show there. They're the host of the Masters every year. And I was a college kid who worked inside at the counter, who they let play during the tournament. And I was lucky enough to shoot a pretty good first round score, not great, but good enough to sort of be at the top of the leaderboard. And then I had to work that afternoon, and Rick was covering the tournament. He was really there to cover guys like Mike McCoy, Gene Elliott, John Brown, guys who really had a chance to win. But he took the time to talk to me a little bit about my round, and I kind of thought that was really pretty cool. Little did I know how special of a sports writer I was talking to, and a golf writer in particular. Part of the reason he was so special was because he took the time to learn a little bit about the up-and-coming new players, as well as continuing to gather knowledge and gain facts about the established players like Gene, Mike, John, all those guys who always win. I then began working for the IGA. Rick and I kind of struck up a friendship as he would come out and cover our events. In particular, we spent quite a bit of time riding around on a golf cart together, watching the leaders in the Iowa Amateur, or watching the final matches in the IGA match play. And he always had some little fact or item that he would come up with that would play into that particular tournament. I remember in 2010 at Bentry in the Iowa Amateur, Mike McCoy was kind of running away with things. And Rick was coming up with stuff like that. You know, this is the lowest score in relation to par ever. This is the lowest cumulative score ever. This is the biggest gap between winning your first Iowa Amateur and your last Iowa Amateur. And he was able to just figure that stuff out so quickly, and then he'd write about that and put it into his articles and weave it terrifically into the narrative. And you know, Rick's mentor, and probably the reason why he got into sports writing, was his father, Bob, who spent his career writing for the Fort Dodge Messenger. And then Rick began writing his articles for the Des Moines Register in 1978, and he ultimately spent 38 years there. He accepted a buyout from the paper in 2015, and that was in that final year, he won the Iowa Sportswriter of the Year Award. The Iowa Sportswriter of the Year Award has been given out since 1959, and Rick finished his career with 11 Sportswriter of the Year awards. He won his first in 1991. So think about that for a second. In a 25-year span between 1991 and 2015, Rick was the Iowa Sportswriter of the Year 11 times. 44% of the time, he was the Sportswriter of the Year. That's dominance right there, Rick. His 11 awards are the most all-time. The next closest anybody has is 7. And then, again, just to illustrate how he kind of followed in Dad's footsteps, his dad, Bob, had 3 of them, so that's 14 for the family. That's pretty good. During his career, Rick kept us informed on golf in and around our state, as well as being our eyes and ears for many national and global championships. He covered Jack Newman winning the U.S. Public Links in 2008, Mike McCoy winning the U.S. Mid-Amateur in 2013, and then when both of them got to play in the Masters because of that, Rick was covering that. During his time covering Zach Johnson's fantastic career, he's on site at numerous major championships, Ryder Cups, PGA Tour events. I know he has a ton of highlights, but I'm certain one of them is the year that he got picked in the media lottery and got to play Augusta National the day after the Masters. At the time, and still, I joke with him about how jealous I am of that, but in all honesty, Rick, it makes me extremely happy that such a genuinely good guy who has such a passion for the game got to play that round of golf, because you more than deserve it, so that's pretty cool. While Rick spent a lot of time writing about golf, he spent probably more covering collegiate athletics around our state, in particular covering Iowa and Iowa State. He's so respected that last September, he joined his father as an inductee on the Kinnick Stadium Media Wall of Fame. The University of Iowa gives this honor to those who, quote, have covered Hawkeye football with integrity, accuracy, and fairness over a long period of time. Rick and his dad are the only father-son duo to achieve this honor. In his time covering Iowa State athletics, he worked a ton with Mike Green, who's the sports information director at Iowa State. When Mike's a good friend of mine, and when I told Mike that Rick had been nominated for the Hall of Fame, he submitted a letter of support. And in it, he had this to say, quote, "Rick has been one of Iowa golf's greatest ambassadors. Simply put, he is the Grantland Rice of Iowa golf. If Rick called to do a story, you felt pretty special." And I could not agree more. When Rick was at your event, you knew it was a big deal. Or maybe it's because Rick was at your event, it was a big deal. Rick said in his farewell article in the Register that his career crossed the intersection of love and passion on a daily basis. He loved sports and had a passion for writing about it. Well, Rick, you're a hell of a writer. We still love reading your work today. And we appreciate everything you've done for the golf community in and around our state. So it's my pleasure to introduce you as a new Hall of Fame member. Congratulations.
Boy, how do you top that? First of all, I would like to acknowledge the other award winners. I didn't know Mr. Roewert at all, but I remember Jerry Johnston talking so much about him, and so congratulations to him. Jerry, I wish I had $1 for every word had written about the Smith family, or wrote about the Smith family in my career. I'd be living in Florida and doing nothing. Maybe caddying for you in a second. You're a true champion, Darren. That you're a great guy. Brad Schuchat. I started covering golf like 2 years after Brad won his last Iowa Amateur at Des Moines Golf and Country Club in 1980. But I would go back and read all the articles about him, and what a true champion. Everyone I know that knew Brad talked not only about his championship ability on the golf course, but his championship ability as a gentleman of the game of golf, and that is a special thing. And John, I played a lot of rounds on this course. Number 18 green, I still can't figure it out. But when we had that mesocyclone go through here that time, and you had to redo your golf course, I've admired you so much since then, because you had played, and it was still a championship caliber course, despite what you had to face. So congratulations to all of you. I would also like to recognize some very important people in my life. My wife Karen, sitting back here, my son Ben, my daughter Blair. I love you all so much, and it means the world to me that you're all here, so thank you very much. I'd also like to acknowledge my brother Roger, sitting back over with him. Thanks for being one hell of a brother, I appreciate it. I made a living with the written word during my career as a sports writer, but there's one word that describes how I feel standing here in front of you this evening. That word is humble. The Iowa Golf Hall of Fame, it's not a planned destination. I don't think anyone here started playing or being in the game so they could get this honor. But and in my case, golfing skill is apparently not a prerequisite. But I thank you so much for inviting me into this distinguished club. My love for golf started when I was 13 years old. My parents joined the Fort Dodge Country Club. And that's when I met a very important man in my life. Some of you here knew him. His name was W.E. Bill Hurd. He was the golf pro there. We called him Pro. Simply, he was pro. But that's where I got my first job. And I started in the club room, cleaning clubs and cleaning the golf carts, stocking the pop and the cigarette machines at the end of the day. Anything else that was needed. Now Bill idolized Ben Hogan. And Bill had this nice syrupy swing, and he always held the finish, just a thing of beauty. And the last time I saw Bill alive, it was right before I went to college, and I looked back, he was finishing the shot, he was on the range. That's my last image. But I always wanted to be like Bill Hurd. He was a true testimony to club pros all over this state and everywhere else. Fort Dodge Country Club kind of became my playground, and golf became one of my passions. And as a kid, I had a hometown idol. He's a Golf Hall of Famer, Tom Chapman Jr. Tom played basketball and golf for the Hawkeyes, but he was my idol, and I would caddy for him every year at the Fort Dodge Amateur. We won quite a few of them too, now that I think about it. But I'll never forget one time we had a vacation, family vacation, so I couldn't caddy. So we got back and I was reading the papers and I'm going, how in the heck can this 16-year-old kid from Oskaloosa named Jeff Smith beat Tom in a playoff? How did that happen? I couldn't figure it out, but now it's a Golf Hall of Famer Jeff Smith, so now it makes a little more sense to me. But in my reward for caddying for Tom was always he'd give me his used golf balls and golf gloves. And the gloves are about 3 sizes too big, but I'd wear those babies until they fell apart because he was my guy. And I got to play in the Fort Dodge Amateur a few times and played in the sauna here a lot. And whenever I come here, I think of Harry and Gertrude Furlwine and David Erickson and Ross DeBoer, who's sitting back here. Those people, to me, are Hyperion in the Sonic tournament. I think of them always. But those tournaments, they kind of opened my eyes to the wonderful world of amateur golf in Iowa. I met people like John Nervig here and George Turner. They ran the Iowa Masters, and there's so many people that just made Iowa golf was such a big deal to me. And I graduated from Iowa in the late 70s, got a job as a sports copy editor at the Register. And my dream was to cover golf. Well, luckily, Buck Turnbull handed me that baton in 1982. My first event was the Iowa Amateur at Finkbine that year. And I kicked off a labor of love that lasted until I took the buyout offer that Chad mentioned from Gannett, the company that owns the Register, in December of 15. But one day a friend pointed out to me how impeccable my timing was. And he was right. I mean, I met Zach Johnston when he was a junior at Drake. And what a journey, man. He took me from the Ryder Cup in Ireland to the Masters at Augusta National. Because of him, I got to play Augusta, like Chad mentioned. I got to drink out of the claret jug. I mean, you can't make that stuff up. Pretty special. I used to go back in the microfilm years back, and I would read Bert McGrane's coverage when Jack Fleck beat the great Ben Hogan in 1955 at the Olympic Club to win the U.S. Open. And I thought, gosh, I would give anything to cover a big story like that. Well, thanks to Jack Johnson, I got over that. I got my chance, not once, but many times. Not only Zach, but I'll never forget sitting with Mike McCoy in the locker room at Augusta National after he played in 2014 for winning the public links championship the year before. What a great moment that was. And I still remember Mike's phone call to tell me he'd made the Walker Cup team in 2015. I mean, I wrote about native Iowans and Hall of Famers. Jerry Smith, Lon Nielsen, both won on the Champions Tour. I mean, a state like Iowa, how cool is that? I once got to do a site tour at Tournament Club of Iowa in Polk City with the late, great Arnold Palmer. We rode alongside in a Cushman and hopped around there. It was a 2-hour joyride I'll never forget. I got so lucky I talked to so many great players too, but some of them were always excited to talk to me. Where one time Lee Trevino didn't want to give me the time of day, then I pulled out the old Iowa trick car from my back pocket. Hey, you got any Bobby Moreland stories for me? Man, he stopped and we had a nice visit, Bobby, so thank you. I don't know if I ever thanked you for that. So yeah, and then the Des Moines Golf and Country Club's host the Senior Open in '99. 2 years later, the Champions Tour comes to town. It's been here ever since. They're right. My timing was impeccable. I have to admit it. But deep down, covering golf in this state is where my heart always was. I covered Jerry Smith here when he's on the PGA Tour, now the Champions Tour. Jerry, I also covered you when you won the 1986 Fort Dodge Amateur. So, and I probably enjoyed that story more than anything I've written. I covered the Masters and the Iowa Masters. I covered the U.S. Open and the Iowa Open. I've seen a lot of great shots, made a lot of great friends. But there's one thing that's universal. Golf is a humbling game. And I'm humbled to stand here before you tonight, and all I can say is thank you very much.